Okay, assalamu alaikum everybody. Thank you for coming. So I just wanted to kind of teach about herbal medicine, and this is going to be a very, very basic introduction to herbal medicine. It's not going to be very comprehensive. I'm not going to condense 2.5 years of schooling into like 1 hour. But I did want to just at least give some introduction about what herbal medicine is and what it can be used for and stuff. And that is not my last name, but you'll find out why I put it like that. It's just a little bit of herbalist humor that just for me. So why is a pharmacist teaching about herbal medicine? You probably wondered, why would a pharmacist teach herbal medicine? Because usually pharmacists are all about drugs and not herbs. So actually, when I was in pharmacy school, I took one elective on herbal medicine. And it was very cut and dry, very, very basic. It was just kind of like very scientific based, if you want to say that. But it just opened my eyes to the idea that plants, that the things that we have in our garden, that the things we put in our food, and that we step on every day, or pull out as weeds, could be used as medicine. It just intrigued me. And so that kind of just like planted a seed, if you want, pun intended, of course. So, in learning about herbs. And then fast forward, I was working as a pharmacist. I was in working in a hospital. And I just saw that patients were on so many medications. And they were just coming in and out on the same medications. And so I was just wondering, why is anybody like talking to them about their condition? Is anybody counseling them? Why are they on like Ambien for 3 years? Why can't they sleep? Is anybody kind of counseling them? And so I just went on a journey of like random emails and random Google searches to find random people to kind of help me find some sort of anything that could be complementary to pharmacy that could help me, or kind of be more of a change in the world. Because as a pharmacist, anybody who is a pharmacist or knows a pharmacist, we don't really have much of a say in people's health. We're mostly just the drug dispensers. If we do any counseling, it's just about the medication, any interactions or anything. So I just wanted to see like if there was something that like I could do complementary to pharmacy, and I just, like I said, random Google searches, random people, and I finally found a school that like really spoke to me, and so I decided to go and study and get my master's degree in herbal medicine. So they say that you can tell what something is by what it is not. And so I first want to say that herbal medicine is not homeopathy. I once believed they were the same. I didn't know what the difference was. But if anything, if you take anything away today, it's that herbal medicine and homeopathy, not the same. So what is homeopathy in very, very basic terms? I'm not going to go into it because I'm not even a novice at homeopathy. Number one, they base their principles on like cures like. And then number two is that it's an extremely diluted amount of that substance, whatever it is using to treat that ailment. And so that's the basic about homeopathy. Number two, it's not a substitute for conventional drugs. A lot of times, especially when people find out that I've studied herbs and that I'm a pharmacist, they'll say, oh, well, I want to get off of this medication. So is there an herb that I can take instead of this drug? And most likely the answer is no. Because number one, I'm not authorized to help anybody get off of any medication. I'm not authorized to change any medication. And number two, I would not do that even if I could, because really it should be done under the supervision of a doctor. And number three is that herbs don't really work that way. There's no herb for depression and no herb for cholesterol and no herb for like high blood pressure. Generally, they work for they have certain actions, which we'll get more into later, but they're not specifically for a certain disease state. And number three, it is not magic. So basically, can't take an herb and say like, oh, this is just gonna treat everything that I have, every problem that I have. Herbs are not gonna just be the solution to all, any physical ailments that you might have. It doesn't mean that you should just take herbs and you'll never, ever, ever have to take drugs. It's not like this cure-all or this treat-all. A lot of times people will just kind of go to herbal medicine only and just feel like if everybody just, went natural and just took everything natural, they wouldn't have as many problems. That's not necessarily true. Herbs do have a limitation. They're not magic. So, I don't know what happened. Okay. And then, so now that we've finished what herbal medicine is not, here are some other questions that I've gotten. What exactly is an herbalist? So I do call myself an herbalist because I've studied herbs, but who else can call themselves an herbalist? Literally anybody. If you pick up a book and you read about herbs, you could be like, I'm an herbalist now. So there's no registration, there's no license, there's no regulation. So anybody could literally call themselves an herbalist. And there are pros and cons to having no certification and no regulation by the government. But basically, anybody can call themselves an herbalist. But why did I go specifically to get a master's degree in herbal medicine? Number one, because I was a pharmacist. I wanted that extra credibility. And number two, I really liked the program that it was very structured and very comprehensive, very clinically based. So I really enjoyed it, and I really thought it was developed very well, especially for our modern times with all the science and research and everything. It was like a bridge between modern and traditional. And so when people find out that I'm a herbalist, that I've studied herbs, they say, oh, great, can I send my mother or whoever to you? Because she can really use it. And again, the answer is most likely no. Because everybody's journey to health is their own. You cannot force anybody, you cannot even gently encourage or more than gently encourage someone. It's not something for everybody. And especially because the herbal, when I sit down with a client, it's a very personal thing. Like the first sessions are usually an hour and a half. Other sessions are an hour. We talk about a lot of things. And so if someone's not ready to kind of go on that journey towards their own health, nothing anybody else can say can put them on it. And it's the same if someone has a family member who's not Muslim or a family member that doesn't pray. What do people usually tell them? Like, you can't, there's nothing that you can do to kind of push them towards that. You have to do it yourself. And hopefully, but not necessarily, it won't necessarily be absolutely the cause for them to kind of go on their own journey, but hopefully maybe they'll kind of be encouraged through you and you're taking your own steps towards health. So everybody's journey is their own, and it's not for anybody else to kind of push them onto that. Believe me, I know how much you love your mother, cousin, sister, father, husband, wife. It's just not, like, it doesn't work. So, okay, and then another question that I get is, can herbs be used to treat something? Or what herb can I take for something? Again, herbs don't really work that way. There are herbs that can be very specific for a certain situation, usually in an acute situation. So if someone has a fever or if someone just has a rash that they just got like out of nowhere, yes, there could be like an herbal remedy that I could recommend. And some other situations, but generally speaking, if someone comes and says like, oh, I have anxiety, what herb can I take for that? It's more complicated than that. Because what one person's anxiety, one person's anxiety might show up as is another person's anxiety. Because people have conditions, they are not conditions. So you are not anxiety, you have anxiety, right? You are not high blood pressure, you have high blood pressure. So every body is different, and so everybody's gonna have a different recommendation. Even siblings might have 2 different recommendations. People with anxiety, some people experience anxiety in their stomach, some people experience anxiety in their heads. And so each person's recommendation is gonna be different depending on that person and other factors that might be taken into place. Okay, so these are things that can affect your health. So that's why it's not just simple like, oh, I'll just take something for my stress and then we'll just forget these other 7 things. Okay, so which one of these, can anybody tell me, can you not do anything about, ever? Like, just, it is what it is. Yeah, basically. So I can't change your genetics, you can't change your genetics, but that does come into play in how it affects your health. What are some things that you think, and there's obviously a color-coded answer key here, but what do you think can be changed through herbal medicine? Yeah, what else? Okay, there's one more. There you go, great, I love it. Thank you. So yes, those 3 can be changed through herbal medicine. The other 4 can also, like, that's not necessarily something that herbs can directly change, but an herbalist can help kind of work with. So they can work with your diet. Movement is just another word for exercise, but I prefer movement because anything can be movement, but not everything can be exercise. So, and yeah, so these are things that, like, and people don't think their social life affects their health, but it really, really does. And so people kind of forget that sometimes. And a lot of these are interplays. So stress can affect sleep, and then social life can affect stress. They all kind of interplay with one another. Okay, so what about herbal medicine today's time? So the FDA does not regulate herbs at all, which is both good and bad. There's pros and cons to that. They list them as dietary supplements, which means that they're regulated the same as food. So they're only regulated for safety, not efficacy. And then they must have, if you ever buy an herbal product, you will see on it, this product is not intended to cure, prevent, or treat any disease. It has to say that. And any herbal product cannot say anything that relates to treatment. It can only say like helps or supports or may alleviate or just some like very vague statements like that because they're not considered drugs at all. And then GRAS, GRAS, is another, it's just an acronym for generally regarded as safe. So the FDA has listed some herbs as generally regarded as safe. I would take those with a grain of salt because some herbs that they have on there might not be great for a person to just try on their own. As a pharmacist, I know I see a lot of senna. Senna is an herb, and it's used a lot, and it's not supposed to be used a lot. It's actually not good for chronic use at all. And unfortunately, it's used a lot in the elderly population, and so it causes a lot of problems. But people kind of just give it. And anyway, but so okay. And then for scientific research, I kind of did a small like informal survey of like what people would want to know about herbal medicine, and scientific research was one of the top ones that a lot of people answered. And there are quite a bit of scientific research on certain herbs, especially the ones that are gaining popularity. There is, though, like, I feel like there is something that needs to be said about taking scientific research and not taking anecdotal evidence. So can anybody tell me what herb most people, especially some people in this room, I'm sure, drink almost every day, and it's very popular, and I'm sure nobody has ever read any scientific studies about it? Close? I mean, it's tea, but yeah, but there's another one that's specially. Yes, thank you. Who said coffee? Someone said coffee, yes. Okay, coffee, yeah. I mean, how many people, before they ever drank a cup of coffee, were like, wait, I want to make sure that there was a scientific study and like that it was safe to take, and I want to make sure that like it was actually like, you know, they did a well-rounded study to make sure that people actually got energized by this drink. You know, it wasn't, most people, I'm sure, they didn't do that. Most people just drank a cup of coffee, went to a Starbucks, went to a coffee shop, got their first cup of coffee, and that's it. Like, they were just taking that herb for the rest of their lives. And it is an herb. People don't think it is, but what else would it be? So I just wanted to kind of show, like, because it is anecdotal, like, people just told one another about it, and it just kind of went through, like, through a chain of, like, testimony. And as Muslims, we are very much about testimony. Like, we don't just say, like, well, can you prove it? Because we know that there are things that cannot be proven. And we know that people will say, well, that's scientifically impossible. But we know because it was told to us through, like, multiple, and it's like so many people had said it, like, from our traditions, that we just know it's true. We just believe. And so I feel like even though scientific research does have a part, anecdotal evidence is definitely something that should be and can be taken into consideration as well. So the limitations for scientific research, though, so number one, you'd have to look at how they did their scientific research. Did they give the whole plant, or did they give an extract of the plant? Because there's curcumin and then there's turmeric. Did they give a powder or a capsule? Did they make a tea or did they give a capsule? So did they give it to rats or did they give it to humans? Did they put it in a petri dish or did they give it to rats? These are all things that can come into play in how the research can be taken and applied to human beings. And one thing that, like, kind of on a side note, just kind kind of bothers me is that a lot of times they'll use these scientific research to prove that like certain herbs are dangerous for certain people. So like after surgery, people can't have garlic or ginger, and I'm just like, okay, how much, do you know how much ginger people will have to take in order to even like slightly cause some sort of like bleeding? And so, but these things have to be taken into consideration when you're applying them, because number one, and then well, as I said before, every body is different, but also every plant is different. So a dandelion that grows in the backyard here at the masjid is different than a dandelion that grows out in a field in the middle of Ohio or Iowa. And it's different than a dandelion that someone grows in their own garden. So each one of them is going to have a different kind of, you know, like component or structure. And then, yeah, so every plant is different, every body is different, everything is going to have its limitations in how it's going to be, yeah, like how it's going to be absorbed, how it's going to be taken into consideration. So I think that's, yeah. Oh, and then another thing I wanted to make sure to say is that there's also a difference between traditional uses and modern uses. So does anybody know what St. John's wort is used for? How's that video? St. John's wort? No? Huh? No. Well, so the modern use for St. John's wort is depression. But traditionally, it was never used for depression. Like, it was just never used that way. It was actually used for nerve damage and pain. And so anything like from shingles to herpes, simplex, like cold sores, because it has some antiviral components, that's what it was mainly used for. But nowadays, you see it as the herb for depression. And like it's even compared to like Zoloft in efficacy and stuff like that. But historically, that was never the case. And so when you see these studies like, oh, you know, St. John's wort could be or not, you know, used for depression, I would say take it with a grain of salt and look at the historical ways that it was used and how it's being given. So I think that's it. Okay, so if you want to start taking herbs or learning more about herbs, where do you start? So you can ask your friendly neighborhood herbalist if that's possible. And you can buy herbs from reputable companies because, like I said, they're not regulated by the FDA. So if they're they have to have some good manufacturing processes, but that does not necessarily mean that they're going to be 100% authentic of whatever they're saying that is in their product. There are some reputable companies that I can recommend. And then start slow. I would say start with herbs that have almost no interactions or no side effects known. And then read some classical books on herbs, like traditional books. I have one that's here if anybody wants to look at it. And some of them can be found online. And then if you can, find and take some herbal classes. So they could be helpful to just learning more about herbs. And then, so I wanted to give one profile of an herb. So chamomile is a lovely herb. And so the scientific name, I just wanted to make sure everybody kind of paid attention to that because that name is universal. If you go to anywhere in the world, India, if you go to Colombia, anywhere, and you wanted to ask for chamomile, you wouldn't ask for chamomile, you would ask for Matricaria ricotida. And then the family, that's why I had that stuff after my last name. The family, so that is just anybody who's ever taken biology, you have the family, genus, and species. So the family is Asteraceae, which means they're in the daisy family, and so they're related to anything else in the daisy family. And so if someone happens to have allergies to anything in the daisy family, it might cause some allergic reaction, but that's very rare. And so when you look up an herb, you'll see that it has like part used, and then so sometimes it'll be the root that's used, sometimes it'll be the leaves that are used, sometimes it'll be the whole part from above the ground, sometimes it'll be all the stuff below the ground. The dosage can change, and depending on where you're looking at it, and it'll also depend on, not really depend on how, but like sometimes it's used as an infusion, which means as a tea. Or sometimes it's used as a powder, but it's usually the same amount, but depending on the indication. So for chamomile, for instance, I would take a lot more than 3 grams if I was using it for an acute situation, like if I had really bad back spasms or really bad indigestion, something like that. The usage or actions, anti-inflammatory, anti-spasm. Nervine just means that it's just a calming herb. And so you'll see a lot of words that you might not recognize in their actions. Those are just kind of like, you just learn them and you kind of figure them out afterwards. And okay, so TLDR, too long, didn't remember. If you got anything from here, it's just that herbal medicine is awesome when used appropriately and properly. It's a separate medicine on its own. It's not just the natural version of drugs, and you don't have to have one or the other. You can use drugs and you can use herbs together. They just have to be used wisely together. And then people have conditions, they are not conditions, right? People have whatever they have, but there are whole people. So we can't just like throw things at them like, oh, here, just take this and that'll be fine. Again, with the scientific studies, there's advantages and there's pros and cons. And then everyone's health journey is theirs to take alone. Can't push anybody, you can't force anybody. Not that you would, but it's still like just even encouragement can sometimes be like just not something that I would recommend. And then that's it. Questions, and if you have any, and thank you for your time and attention. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Yes. It depends on the herb, actually. So with certain herbs, they're better as teas, and with some herbs, they're actually not better as teas because of just depending on like how the water can extract the constituents in them. In an acute situation, it depends. Like if you're out and you're just like, I'm in pain or whatever, and you wanted to take an herb, a tea is not the best because it still has to go through the bloodstream. Unfortunately, the fastest way to get something into the body is through tinctures, and those are usually alcohol-based. But there are pills, there are capsules, so those can be helpful depending, again, on the herb. Because if it's something like chamomile and it's like, oh, I need to take 9 grams of chamomile, that's a lot of pills. Versus if you were to take, but if you are able to take, like let's say chamomile, for instance, if you are able to make 9 grams of chamomile tea because you're home and whatever, I would say, yeah, that would be. But yeah, again, it depends on the herb because, yeah, sometimes they're not good as teas. Anybody? Yes? I mean, I just know because we studied in school, and we know that some of them, like, they hire herbalists and, you know, their manufacturing processes and stuff like that. Like New Chapter, actually, one of my classmates works for them. Gaia, another classmate, works for them. Traditional Medicinals, actually, not a classmate, but a previous student worked there. And I actually went to Traditional Medicinals factory one time when I visited California, and it was amazing. Like, so because herbs are only supposed to be dietary supplements, they only have to meet food grade. They actually meet pharmaceutical grade. They're very meticulous. They would like make sure everything is on the up and up. They even like seal their bags and seal their teas in like wax lined bags. Even though so you can't compost them or recycle them, but they thought like it's more important to keep the herbs like fresh. So it's kind of, I guess, research and just knowing like who's behind it and like who do they hire? Do they just like kind of do it out of their basement or something? But you know, like don't buy it from. I would say probably don't buy it from like a GNC or a supermarket or something, or even like, yeah. So I would look for things like maybe at Sprouts. There are some herbal stores. Maybe they would carry some better products, but I can try to find some more information about that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know, because we studied mostly Western herbs. Well, we did have a little bit of Ayurvedic herbs and just a few Chinese herbs. I don't know. I mean, I like Western herbs because we are here and it's like maybe more um, just accessible. Um, but I mean, you could just look through, just look through the books and see, what kind of recommendations they have because they sometimes their herbs differ also on how they're classified. Like I know Chinese herbs. I don't know if I would necessarily go with Chinese herbs just because like it's very complicated sometimes. Like they're yeah, but just start with Western, I think, because I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. I mean, I studied Western herbs. We studied a little bit of Ayurvedic. Ayurvedic is very interesting, actually, in the way that they kind of conduct the temperaments and everything like that. So the temperaments is actually a whole another discussion, and it could be a class on its own. Uh, yeah, because like there's some ashwagandha is an Ayurvedic herb, but we learned about that, and I think you can even find it in some Western herbs. And some of them overlap. Like licorice, I believe, is both in Chinese and but they might use it a little bit differently. So yeah, yeah, it is a lot of reading because everybody has a different approach. Yes, yeah. Um, Probably that's a good question actually because I've studied both, so I can. There are some databases that have. So that yellow book that I have is actually a really good book. That's the older version. There's actually a newer version, but that one has the herbs and it actually will list the interactions. I think one of them is actually a pharmacist, one of the writers of that book. But I would say a pharmacist who's learned about herbs would be the best person because even herbalists are not really well versed in medicine, drugs, and then pharmacists are not really well versed in drugs, in herbs. So you have to have someone who's been in, yeah. Yes. Oh, oh. Mm. Oh, okay. So herbs would help, like, probably in supporting you um, in other aspects, but the other stuff would probably have to be done through diet, through medication, because, like I said before, herbs do have a limit. So I would say if you wanted to take herbs, it would probably be for like maybe the side effects of the medication, something to help if you're having trouble digesting certain things. They can help with that. So it can help in supporting you as like through your kind of yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Mashallah. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing. It's very complicated. I don't know how to like treat diabetes just on like or your diabetes. So that's the thing because it's your individual case. So yeah, because and so I'd have to talk to you in person and see like what we could come up with. And okay, yeah, we can talk after. Yes. Allopathic and homeopathic. I don't, like I said, I'm not really an expert on homeopathic remedies, so I can't speak for homeopathic remedies. I don't know that they would have any interactions, but I can't speak for it. Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, you mean herbal medicine allopathic or yeah, or herbal, yeah. It depends. So St. John's wort is one that a lot of people will flag because it has a lot of interactions. But like chamomile, I wouldn't have any problem recommending it to anybody, even if they're taking like 20 medications. But it depends on the herb. and it depends on the drugs. It has a lot of great benefits. That's why I have so much of it. If you want to have some later, it. I'm sorry. AFib? Probably not, but it has anti-inflammatory properties, and it has a calming effect, right? So any of these things can help with whatever person's like condition is. I'm not saying it's not gonna just help with AFib or some sort of other conditions, but it just helps just the body kind of like get back into a sort of calmness. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it can help. It can help with that. So I can't say it can treat because herbal medicine is not medicine. So it's like a dietary supplement. So I can't say it can treat it, but I can say it can help. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, for calming, there's actually I have a cup of calm right there. So it's by traditional medicinals, I believe. Lemon. So the herbs that I can say are like really, really very safe and probably wouldn't have any problems. Chamomile, red clover is not for, and it's not for like a calming effect, but it's just nice in general. Holy basil is one that's good. It's also called tulsi in Ayurvedic herbs. Um, then there's lemon balm, and then and then like a lot of the mint family ones like lavender, but not too much because it has a very overpowering flowery taste. And even catnip. Surprisingly enough, yes, catnip can be given to humans. It's also called catmint, and it actually can be given to children. So a lot of these herbs that I just mentioned can be actually given to children. That's why I would say, like, in general, it wouldn't be, I wouldn't have a problem recommending it, like, overall. And nettles. Nettles is another herb. That's just more of a, like, general health herb. Nettles and red clover just are for general health, but, like, chamomile, lemon balm, what was the other one? Catnip, yeah. And holy basil would be good for, like, just to, like, have, like, a calming tea. Yeah, if you have some, yeah. Really good. Yeah. I have a lot of chamomile here, so if you, oh, and I have some tea if anybody would like to try some. I know some people have issues with chamomile because it's too bitter. But see, I feel like people drink coffee and it's super bitter. I'm not saying go ahead and make chamomile lattes or anything, but at the same time, and that's what I love about herbal medicine is that you can experiment and like make all sorts of like, different ways to take herbal medicine. So what I did was I made an extra concentrated amount of chamomile tea, and then I froze it, made ice cubes. And then I made a different kind of tea. I made elderberry tea, and then I put the ice cubes in the elderberry tea. And so now you have, and so you can make, let's say you want to take chamomile, but you hate the taste. But you love, like let's say apple juice, I don't know. So make an extra concentrated amount of chamomile tea, freeze it, make like little ice cubes, and then place it in your juice or whatever beverage that you want to make cold. And now you have both your tea and your refreshing beverage. Yeah, so, yes. Uh, so, apparently, yeah, so, yeah. Go to cola? Is it go to cola? Yeah, take, and then, huh? No, you could just take some, and then there's some here. Yeah, and there's some here. Yeah, just anything.
Sorry, I'm disturbing.
Go to cola. I don't remember that being. I have to look back at my notes for go to cola. I studied quite a, huh? The stimulant. I remember it for something else, but I have to. There are some herbs that are like known to help memory. Yeah. Yeah. So, but like I said, like people have their whatever they're trying to work on, but then they themselves are completely like I can't just say like, oh, for everybody who needs memory help, just take this. The only thing I can say is because it's a milder herb. I would say rosemary. You can like smell some. So apparently Shakespeare called it the herb of remembrance. So you can just I made these things because of when I was in herbal school, we had to do an herbal show, and so I did like mind, body, and spirit, and then I did so for the mental health that I like to. I made a rosemary candle, so it was like you can smell it and you can burn the midnight oil sort of thing. So you can like find ways to like smell some rosemary, maybe incorporate it in your food, cook with rosemary. Well, the thing is so remember when I said that you have a lot of things affect health, right? Like, okay, so let's say someone wants to focus on their memory, but their sleep is terrible, awful. So if I give them this herb for memory, and then they're just continuing to sleep, like, that's also going to affect their brain health, right? Their brain capacity. So we focus on, yes, we try to like just boost their memory a little bit short term, but at the same time, the long term is to like help that person's memory capacity and work on them personally and see like, okay, what could be contributing to your poor memory? Yeah, so there are, I'm not going to say it because, yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say rosemary because it's very like mild, safe. I don't feel comfortable just recommending, especially since this is being recorded, that, just going and saying like, oh, this is the herb to take, because then, like I don't want to be, like held accountable just for someone taking it. I'll be like, oh, I took it and now I have problems. But so, not that because I don't like, I'm not there to like guide them through it and help them and, so, but I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes. Um, so as an herbalist, I have clients because I can't treat, so they're not patients. But that's just a side note. But I actually, I don't know if I did it out loud. I have the book. I haven't read through it actually. To be honest. But I haven't as much. One of the people who graduated, I think, either 1 or 2 years before me, she actually did her final paper on black seed. So, and there is actually scientific research on it, but I haven't personally used a lot of sunnah, like herbs or medicine. If I did have a Muslim as a client, I would have a lot more to say, like on the spiritual side, and say like, okay, because we believe in different ways of healing, the person. But I don't, yeah, I can't say that I was. Oh, that's cool. Yes and no. So it's the same herbs a lot of times, like rosemary and mint, yeah, but they're used differently. And I'm not trained in essential oils at all. I use them, but I'm not trained in them at all. Yeah, because they're completely different. They're used externally, and they're super duper concentrated. But they can be used like to help, like lavender oil, just smelling, like aromatherapy can be used to help a person like relax or, whatever, energize, kind of like, and yeah. We did study a lot of pharmacognosy, so we studied like super duper nerdy science stuff about like what components they have and how it's like metabolized in the body and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Not me personally, but what I was trained to do was help that person, like support that person in in their cancer. So if they were experiencing a lot of nausea, giving herbs for their nausea. If they were experiencing a lot of like whatever, like fatigue, you know, helping them kind of just like feel better just on a daily basis, but not directly with the cancer itself. Yes. So again, going back to the historically, so they did actually have a lot of herbs that they, if you look in the books, they would have herbs for melancholy or to help like, I forgot what word they used specifically, but they would use certain herbs to kind of like lift the spirits or whatever. So lemon balm was, I think, one of them. I'm trying to think of like the safer herbs to recommend. I have to think about that. But yeah, there are herbs that they would like use to lift the spirits. Forgot what they have a name actually for their action. I can't remember what it is. But yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so they can be made in glycerins, but some of them don't work as well in glycerin. So, because herbs have certain components that are extracted better in certain, so some are water soluble, some are alcohol soluble. And like, just as a random one, like myrrh cannot be, it's not water soluble at all. You cannot do anything but alcohol. Some of them could be good in glycerin. When I had to make tinctures for school, I used vinegar. That was just because I wasn't going to go to a liquor store and buy alcohol, but also I wasn't going to use it. But so I used vinegar, and that is one of the things in the Herbal Medicine Maker's Handbook that I have. That is something, an oxymel is vinegar and honey together. But I think it's just vinegar. There's glycerites, there's vinegar-based. They might not work as well. You might need more of them to work as well. There's also not a lot of them are in like the market, yeah. So, and then anybody else? أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا